Well, guys, I got to be honest with you. I don't celebrate Christmas, but I would imagine this is what Christmas morning feels like, right? At least for MMA fans, it's UFC 194 Fight Day. It's finally here. We are just hours away from one of the most anticipated fight cards of all time. So, naturally, it's time to make some predictions. We've been previewing this card all week long, so it's not going to be our typical UFC 194 preview show that you've come to expect from us, but it's prediction time. Let's get right to it.
All right.
Enough talking, enough breaking down stuff, enough overanalyzing stuff. It's Conor McGregor, Jose Aldo for the undisputed featherweight title. Shaun Al-Shatti, Chuck Mindenhall, Ariel Helwani here in Las Vegas. We're the only ones left. Shaun, who's your pick?
Oh man, I see. I've switched this pick so many times at this point. I came into July picking Conor. I came into this week picking Jose. I think I'm still picking Jose, but man, I am on the fence. Like I'll pick Jose just because we have to make a pick.
Yep.
But this is just one of those fights where it's just I can't get a read on it.
Let me ask you this. Has Jose done anything this week, said anything this week that really makes you feel like, all right, he's the guy I got to go with?
I think just the general sense of calm. He almost has been amused by everything now.
Yeah.
Like it's like back in July, it seemed like he was actually genuinely still bothered by a lot of the things that happened on the World Tour. Just the general setup that whole event led into. Now it just seems like he spent 5 months in Brazil basically just hanging out. Like he's pretty removed from it. And I think if they would have fought in July, I feel like Conor might have won. But
Yes.
at this point, I think Jose's going to win.
That is great analysis because I couldn't agree more. I feel like the fight not happening in July, in hindsight, was a blessing for him. He was so agitated going to that fight. It feels like he knows something that we don't. And I use this line all the time, but y'all must have forgot. Did you forget who the king was? It feels like that's the way he is this week.
I think so too. He's been very stone-faced and let's just get this thing done. I mean, that's been his sort of mentality this whole way through. I feel like in some ways too, like there's been this psychological shift in general because you have McGregor now who's bringing in this movement coach, and there's all these weird things sort of going on around him. Just sort of you're not
Please
sure.
refer to him by his name, Ido Portal.
Ido Portal was, waving his staff at him and trying to, but there's this whole sort of mentality, and then still I was still sort of wanting to take McGregor until I saw the weigh-ins, and I just thought he looked very, very gaunt and depleted, more so than usual. And with this whole IV ban and everything else that goes on, I'm not sure. It just seems like he may not be in his best form tomorrow. I hope he is because I want to see the best clash possible, but it gave me some pause. So I'm going to go with Aldo. I just think his demeanor, like you said, I think he's had a lot of time to just sort of focus, get his mind right, and I feel like we're seeing him now with his mind corrected and ready to go.
How do you foresee it going down?
That's the hard part because it was easier when I was thinking of McGregor. I was thinking, he might catch him, and he was being an opportunist and an aggressive fighter. He would sort of swarm him and put him away. I was sort of seeing it that way, like he's saying, maybe first round, second round. But I think with Aldo, it may just be where he drags him a little further into the fight. I know he gets typically a bad rap because he loses cardio throughout, but I think he'll be fine. He looked pretty good on the scale. I think he may just drag him into a deep fight and get a decision.
What do you think?
It's tough because in my head, the longer the fight goes, the more it benefits Conor because Conor has that power where he really does have that one-shot power for the featherweight division. If you give him 25 minutes, all he needs is one shot. It leans more towards Conor, but in my head, I just can't bring myself to pick Conor at this point. It feels different than it did, like I said, in July. I think Jose wins, but I honestly have no idea how.
You don't know how.
I don't know.
You don't think it's a finish. You're not thinking nothing.
I'll just say finish because we have to pick something.
Yes,
something.
you have to.
Yeah, I'll say something maybe like a fourth round finish.
Okay. I like it. It's going to be fun. Let's talk about the co-main event. See, I like this. Let's get the predictions right out of the way. People are just itching to know what you guys think.
There's a lot of people.
Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold for the middleweight title. In my opinion, this is two guys in their prime, East versus West, Magic versus Bird. I'm sure you haven't heard me say that yet. I've said it at least 1,000 times, but I love this fight. I adore this fight. I've been dreaming about this fight, honestly, since Luke Rockhold became the middleweight champion in Strikeforce, of course.
Yeah.
Your pick.
I look at it more like Alex English and Sidney Moncrief from that era.
Interesting.
This is a credit to these fights this week because I feel like I go back and forth, and then you start to watch basically how things unfold psychologically, how they look when they're going, where their mindset is and how they look on the scale and all that. I went sort of back and forth, but I'm actually sort of leaning towards Rockhold now. I don't know why.
Wow.
It's more this. I feel like he's lived his whole life for this moment. I mean, literally, I feel like his focus has just been that concentrated on getting to this point. And just,
sometimes that comes
sometimes
back
it does,
to hunt.
but I have a feeling for him.
Yeah.
He's very poised. I feel like he's going to get in there. He's going to be very poised. I feel like he's one of those fighters who slows the fight down. He sees what's going on in front of him very well. If he's able to sort of work something, if he figures something out, a very cerebral sort of fighter, I think he's very poised in, going about getting his submission or his knockouts. I don't know, man. He's just giving me a vibe that I think it's winning me over, I think, this week. So I think I'm going to go with Rockhold.
Wow, what do you think? New champ?
I see. I'm sitting here thinking about this card. 4 out of the 5 fights in my head are just complete pick'ems, which is tremendous. But
I wonder what's the no-brainer.
in my head, I think Max Holloway beats Jeremy Stevens. But I came into Monday when I got into Vegas. I was very heavy on Weidman. I thought Weidman was going to win. The longer the week has gone on, Luke Rockhold's kind of like this weird level of focus, and I don't know how to articulate how he's really been reacting to things, but it's kind of swayed me like Chuck a little bit. But just the juxtaposition to Weidman. Weidman's been so laughy and just having a good time and really enjoying it. It's completely unrelated, but I think back to the first time, or the only time Daniel Cormier fought John Jones. He got so wound up the entire time, and it was almost like he mentally peaked out a little early, and he's even spoken about this later. Whereas he was too hyped up for it. I wonder if that's going to affect Luke. I think we maybe even talked about that last night. But I still lean Weidman, but it is
Curveball.
It is much closer in my head than I anticipated.
Does Weidman get the finish? Longo said he would knock him out early.
I think it goes to a very close decision.
Wow.
Maybe a 3-2.
What do you think, as far as the finish? How does Rockhold become the champ?
It's tough, but I'm going to say it's a finish as well, though.
Whoa.
I will say that. I mean, it's sort of every time we do these things, you think, well, we've never seen an example of Chris Weidman being finished. We've never seen him lose. But in my mind, I'm seeing it more from Rockhold's point of view, what he might be trying to do. And I could foresee him putting him in some trouble and sort of whittling him away into something, maybe getting a TKO, maybe 3rd or 4th round.
If Rockhold wins, there's been a lot of talk about Jackson Wink having 3-4 champions by April. They'll have 2. And Cain Velasquez fighting for the belt, they could, in a matter of a few months, have 3 champions. All right, speaking of that middleweight division, of course, we have Yoel Romero versus Ronaldo Jacare Souza. This is a fight we've been talking about for quite some time. Again, just seeing them up there, it's like, wow, this is finally happening. Who's your pick?
I'm going to pick the underdog in this one. I'm going to pick Yoel Romero. In my head, there's just – I don't see – I mean, obviously there's many paths of victory for Jacare Souza, but I feel like – he's going to struggle to get Yoel Romero to the ground because obviously we know Yoel Romero's wrestling accolades, and he hasn't really ever since that Derek Brunson fight. He didn't train wrestling really until that Derek Brunson fight, and since he hasn't been in any kind of threat of being taken down. I'm going to choose the upset. I'm going to choose Yoel Romero.
What do you think?
New York Rick is so upset right now, man. I still go with Jacare in this fight. I feel like he's going to have to get the fight where he wants it. But that's where the question for me is. His striking has improved so much. I almost think he could just stand with them, and as long as he's able to kind of create the space and maybe get some things done on the feet. But I think in a scramble at some point he'll probably catch the 38-year-old guy, the big muscular guy, and be able to put him in some kind of vulnerable position and get a submission.
Wow, early? What a sight that would be.
I would say that I would say fairly early.
And just if Romero wins, power to you. That's a great call, but it's. I just want to say it's forget. When he gets on the mic, forget. Just so we don't see that. Forget. That's the word. Forget. I just don't want to go through that over again. Do you see a finish?
I think it goes to a decision.
Decision.
Yeah.
All right. And he'd be the #1 contender.
Yeah.
So in your world, it's going to be Romero Weidman for the belt. In his world, it's going to be Jacare Rockhold 2.
Yep, part 2. That was first fight was pretty close.
Yes.
And it was pretty entertaining. So, yep, that's what we got.
In front of a capacity crowd in Cincinnati, a raucous crowd.
3,000 screaming partisans.
Or 3. It felt like 3, to be honest. And then it's another dream matchup. It's a matchup that BJJ fans have been talking about for years. Gunnar Nelson, 27 years young, against the 38-year-old Damian Maia. Wow, I cannot wait for this fight. How do you see it going down?
I have no read in this fight at all. I have absolutely no read. I'm going to just throw a dart at a board. I'm going to say Gunnar.
Gunnar?
Yeah.
Does he submit him?
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. Or maybe knock him out, because I think a lot of people would say his striking's better, right?
Yeah, I mean, you got the Brandon Thatch example.
Right.
I'm going to say it goes to a decision again, but I bet it's a great, great fight.
What do you think?
Yeah, man, it's tough for me to go against Maya. I know, and it's crazy because when I think about Gunnar, I think the same thing, sort of like, wow, but you know, Rick's story. I mean, it's like you say, you kind of look back on what just sort of happened, and the Rick story thing still stays there just a little bit. I sense a little more vulnerability. It probably won't matter at all, honestly, but I think Damian Maya's just sort of right now. He's just kind of going through people. If he looks anything like he has in his last couple of fights, I feel like he'll get it done.
And do you think that he finishes him?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, if either guy cements the other, I mean, it's going to be quite a thing. And the way this tonight sort of set the table for, you know, with a couple of good fights, I feel like anything is possible at this point, but I think it'll be a decision.
I note that Maya is 38, but it really feels like he's always in this spot. Oh, Ryan LaFleur, you know, he's going to be, oh, Neil Magny.
Dominates, yeah.
Right. And so maybe, you know, Gunnar is his match. Maybe he's the one to knock him off. But Maya continues to impress every time that it feels like we doubt him. So can't wait for that fight. So last one, you mentioned Max Holloway. He's fighting Jeremy Stephens. You think foregone conclusion. This is the easiest one to predict, right?
First of all, I want to nominate that they just start the Gunnar Nelson fight on the mat. Can we just all vote that that's just a thing that happens? Because I think we would all really like to see that.
But I am curious to see if he can, you know, use his striking, because his
of
striking
course.
is very, you know, is very unique. Anyway,
Yeah.
Stephens Holloway. Why are you so confident in Holloway?
I mean, Max Holloway's just looked like a killer lately, man. And obviously, MMA math is such a silly way to make picks. But I mean, you just look at their relative opponent, the common opponent. I mean, Cub Swanson fought a pretty close fight with Jeremy Stephens. He won, but it was a close fight. Max Holloway just tore through Cub Swanson. I feel like Max Holloway is coming into his own as a legitimate top four featherweight. So I'm gonna pick Max Holloway.
Do you agree?
I do. I feel like he's flying under the radar for a guy. He did have a main event, but he's sort of flying under the radar because of the McGregor loss. But since that time, he's just been going through guys. And I think it's, you know, he has 3 losses in UFC. I think he looks at all of them like, I want to get to them again. He's finally to, what is he, 23 now or 24? But he has all these fights. I feel like he's just coming to the, you know, not even in his prime, but he's starting to creep into that. And I think he's really put the skill set together. And I don't know. I like Jeremy Stephens. I think he's a very dangerous fighter, but I just feel like Max will have an answer for anything he does.
All right. I'm good to go. I'm ready. The time for talking is over. Look, hyperbole is thrown around a lot in sports. Greatest this, greatest that. It's overused quite often. But in this case, this main card is the best of all time. I defy anyone to argue that point against me and come up with a better example. And if you really want to, you know, zero in on fights, the top 2, the main and co-main, it doesn't get any better than this. Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo for the UFC featherweight title. Chris Weidman versus Luke Rockhold for the middleweight title. I just can't believe what's about to go down in Las Vegas in just a few hours' time. We won't be in this room to recap it all. We'll be somewhere else down the strip at the MGM, but trust me, we'll be there to recap it all. Sit back, relax, enjoy what should be a very special night here in Sin City. Of course, MMAfighting.com will have your coverage all night long. We'll see you in a few hours. Enjoy the fights.